Welcome to The Change, a podcast about the changes in life that shake, break, and make us. I'm Laura, a 45-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum who has until recently always loved change.
And I'm Cathy, a 53-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum, and change is actually my kryptonite. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which this podcast is recorded and recognise the continuing connections to lands, waters and communities.
We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and elders past and present.
Hey Laura, how you going?
Cathy, I am well. How are you going?
Pretty well. Yeah, well.
Good.
Yeah.
And who's on the podcast today, Cathy?
We have a fabulous Dr. Dimity Williams. She's a mother, she's a nature lover, she's a family doctor, she's an author of Nature, Our Medicine, and How the Natural World Sustains Us. Dr. Williams has worked as a family physician for over 25 years, and she enjoys looking after the whole person from preconception to old age. She has completed additional training in obstetrics, pediatrics, mental health, and her particular favourite is issuing nature prescriptions. She's the co-founder of the Kids Nature Network, whose signature event is Nature Play Week, and they see thousands of kids just getting out into nature. I'm really curious to hear from Dr. Williams because got to say, I'm not a real nature lover myself. So
You like to look at nature but not necessarily be in it. Is that
I would describe myself as a person who likes the outdoors when the outdoors involves a pool lounge by the side of a pool, not actually being in nature. So let's see if she can convince me otherwise. Hey.
Dimity, should I call you Dr. Williams or Dimity? How would you like to be referred to throughout this chat?
Oh, Dimity, please.
Dimity, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dimity. And really, I just so excited to talk to you about nature and how much have you personally enjoyed being out in nature? Has it always been that way? Were you a child that loved to be outdoors? And then I guess part two to that question is, when did you begin to realize that nature itself may have a role to play later in your career as a GP?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I had a nature-rich childhood, and I would say the outdoors has always been my safe space. You know, it's where I love to go. My mum was a real nature lover and gardener, and she would describe how when I was a baby, she would take me out in the pram and go for walks and just fill my pram up with flowers, you know. So I was very lucky to have this. I think she also was maybe taking a few cuttings, you know, from around the neighbourhood, but it was lovely to have that sort of a childhood. And of course, being a child in the 70s, even though it was in the suburbs of Melbourne, you know, we had bushland at the end of the street. So there was this great sense of freedom and space. You know, there was green space and we had time. You know, we didn't have highly scheduled activities. So we would just all play after school and on the weekends, and all different kids of different ages. And so I really grew up with that. And then I've always spent a lot of time bushwalking and camping. And when I became a mother myself, I really prioritised that for my kids. So we had lots of family holidays, camping and doing all that kind of thing. As far as the connection between nature and my work as a doctor, it always felt odd to me at university that health and nature were kind of these separate domains, you know, because I didn't see it that way. I felt very much happier and healthier, you know, just better when I was the more time I spent outside. And I think what I realised is I just couldn't think of health without thinking about it more broadly. You know, like I think when I was at university in the 90s, it was very thought to be very modern to think about health, not just physical health, but to think about psychological health and then social health. Sort of people that think about people's jobs and education and who was at home with them. So it was really just natural to take this another step and look back at the natural world. And if you kind of think, of course, it makes absolute sense. You know, we have clean air to breathe, we don't have fresh water, we don't have, you know, lots of beautiful nature around us. We can't really be healthy. And I think we all know that now. We've lived through disasters like bushfires, and we know what it's like when the air's polluted and how that makes us feel. And we know how it feels, to be surrounded by a degraded landscape. We all want to
Mm.
be around something that looks beautiful, because we feel better. So it's just kind of this common sense. And I think when I had my children, and I see a lot of children in the clinic, I was really aware of how different children's lifestyles have become compared to this
Mm.
lifestyle, the childhood that I had, and that kids now have this really often highly scheduled life, and there's not much green space around. They often have very small gardens, there's not much park around, they're not allowed to go out often to the park by themselves, not allowed to walk to school. They have these
Mm.
very restricted lives, and then we see this reflected in their health. We have children who are not very active, maybe overweight, struggling with anxiety or focus. There's been this huge shift in my 30 odd years working as a GP in the sorts of things we see in the clinic. I used to see kids coming in with coughs and colds and scratches on their knees, or maybe a broken bone from falling out of a tree or something.
Mm.
But now, there are kids coming in with anxiety or difficulty concentrating or self-harm or
Mm.
Oh God.
school
Yeah.
refusal. Like it's really profound, actually, to think, for me particularly, to think back. And I think that we have to understand health within this broader context, and we have to look at the lives that we're living and the lives that our children are living. So yeah, over this time, of course, I've become much more conscious, and there's been this increased awareness and greater evidence base about understanding this connection and appreciating how therapeutic it is to just simply be in nature. We know it has all these effects on our body and our mind and how we feel. So I spend a lot of my time in my day-to-day practice, encouraging people and supporting people to get out into nature, and love writing nature prescriptions. And people love to be given permission to do that. We have this culture of busyness, and
Mm.
it's quite radical to kind of take time out and just my doctor told me I should lie on the grass and look up at the trees for 20 minutes. um,
Great.
so yeah, but that's therapeutic. So
I
yes,
mean, we
it's
don't
actually
argue.
exciting.
Yeah, well, we don't argue with our doctors when they give us a script for antibiotics or whatever it is, like you might go to the doctors and you say, "Oh, I'm sad," and they do the what is it? The
Edinburgh scale.
Edinburgh scale, that's it. Done it a few times. And they go, "Oh, here's a pill, take an antidepressant," but because it's fast paced or whatever. But if they said to me equally, if they said to me, "Hey, you actually need to go and lie on the grass for 20 minutes," because I've been told to do it and I'm quite a rule follower in that respect,
Mm.
I will go and do it. I might not enjoy it and I might find it really challenging,
Yeah,
but I equally don't like taking the tablet either. So it's, but it's a script. And
yeah.
so that's what I do, Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mm.
It's really, yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
it is. It's really interesting, and I think it's empowering, because it's giving you, you're doing something for your health that makes you feel better.
Mm.
Rather than the power being given to the doctor or the medicine, or the power given to the specialist that you've got to go and see a specialist or a counsellor. And people can't afford always to go and see a
Yeah.
psychologist.
Mm.
So just to have these, and it's not to say that this is the only solution, it's just
Mm.
part of the solution. But yeah, it's something that I really embrace, and yeah, I love to talk to people, and people love to talk about it too when they come back. Mm.
Mm. It's a pretty simple step, really, that most people can do, whether it's going to the park or in their gardens, or as you say, I think when we've spoken before for a story I did a year or so ago, Mamma Mia, when you talked about bringing nature to your unit. If you live in a unit, bring some sticks and leaves and flowers indoors, and try and recreate a bit of nature indoors if that's the best thing you can do. But yeah, everyone can do it. and which is good. It's accessible.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it is just a matter of thinking about creating the time for yourself and
Mm.
and also your orientation, like how you do it. Um,
Mm.
paying attention and just being mindful when you do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Not scrolling on Instagram and looking at the
No, that
trees.
doesn't
That does not count. No,
count.
no taking photos of the trees.
But if I didn't take a photo, was I really there?
I know. I really have to step away
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, yeah.
Dimity, as women in midlife, we're all juggling lots of balls and often feeling very stressed out. So, what would you consider some of the signs for women to say, it's probably time to stop and stop trying to handle it themselves, but maybe they need to actually speak up and get some professional help?
Yeah, I think to think about how that they are in their day-to-day life, like how they're sleeping,
Mm.
whether they're getting enough time to eat well, how they are around their loved ones, like their children or their partner or their close friends. Are they snapping at them and impatient? Are they enjoying the sorts of things they usually enjoy, or are they kind of not doing them anymore? And are they engaging with social activities? Like, are they seeing friends, or are they kind of withdrawn? And also whether they're distracting themselves with consumption. So that might be drinking alcohol or eating food or consuming social media or something like that. If you just kind of find yourself mindlessly scrolling through your phone, eating half a packet of Tim Tams and, then feeling really terrible about it afterwards, then you might be kind of, it might be time to perhaps go and see someone and talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, not that Tim Tams on their own are bad
No,
or,
you just
but it's just not half a packet in a go every night.
I think if you're gonna eat a Tim Tam, you wanna really eat the Tim Tam, right? You wanna be there for the Tim Tam.
Absolutely.
Yum. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything moderation and done a little bit of mindfulness perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, just sort of know that you're doing it. I think it's that thing
Mm.
we don't even know what we're doing, we're just
Mm.
it's like life's kind of I don't know, we're just kind of rushing along. We don't even kind of not we're not really there for it.
I
Yeah.
guess it's a little bit like I'm just sort of thinking like when I go to the movies, I don't go into the movies without a bucket of popcorn. Like,
Mhm.
as weird as that is, I can sit perfectly still at home and watch a movie and not need a bucket of popcorn to get me through the movie. But because I'm at the movies, it's part of the process. And, you know, that's okay because I do that very infrequently. But if I was doing that every single day and just mindlessly consuming, as you say, that's when it becomes the problem, whether and it doesn't necessarily have to be food, it could be anything, alcohol, social media, everything consumed without thinking about it is where the issue is, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And how you feel
Mm.
about it when it's happening. Like, are you noticing that it's happening, and how are you feeling about it afterwards as well? Because
Mm.
I don't think any of these things are inherently bad, but it's the how you are at the time and what you're doing it in response to. And is there something that you are avoiding, or are you trying to cheer yourself up in some way?
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I think our society and our culture is the structures are make it hard. Like, we have
Mm.
alcohol, like we're literally drenched in alcohol. We have, you go to buy popcorn, but it's they're big sizes, aren't they? Like everything's
Mm.
it's hard for people.
Mm.
I think we have to be kind of kind to ourselves as well when we find ourselves in that situation, because a lot of it is to do with things that are really hard for us to control or are beyond our control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I was listening to another podcast, How to Fail with Elizabeth Day, and she was interviewing this guy in the UK called Richard Osman, who's a writer and he works in media, and he was talking about food addiction and how he struggled with that his whole life, and how it's just such a problem when you do have that sort of issue because food you have to eat, so it's very difficult. It's different with alcohol. You can just stop. Well, you can't just stop. It's obviously not that simple, but you can live without alcohol, whereas you can't live without food, and it is such a big major problem. He was just talking about, advertisers and fast food chains, and there's just so much money and consumerism, and you're just fighting this battle when life is hard. You might be poor or you might be unhappy and stressed. It's really very difficult. And as you say, Dimity, like you have to have that kindness towards yourself, because for a lot of people who are struggling, a bit of, half a packet of Tim Tams or escapism on TikTok, it might be a way they can escape their very difficult lives. But yeah, that's not necessarily going to be making them feel any better. So yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's really, we've kind of created this very difficult situation for ourselves, and we need to get back to nature in so
Yeah,
many
and I think
ways.
also particularly for women, because we are so often judged on our appearance, and so
Mm,
we've grown up in this with these unrealistic ideas, and so food is for a lot of people is
mm,
either good or bad. It's not something that you enjoy. It's good for me or it's bad for me, and I
mm,
can have it or I can't have it. It gets very black and white, and there's a lot of emotion and negativity, and it's almost a bit punishing of ourselves.
mm,
So I think it's getting back to that, um, thinking about what you're eating, because if you kind of want to look after your body, then you want to eat well, healthy
mm.
food, and you want to eat with in good company, and you want to kind of know that you're eating. So, going back a bit more of an old-fashioned way, I guess, of actually when you're eating a meal, just sitting and eating a meal, and knowing that you're doing it, and
Yeah, totally. And I was just thinking a little about you mentioned nature prescriptions, and I want to dig into that because I think it's really interesting, and maybe a lot of people might not have heard of that before. Um, and I want you, if you can, tell us a little bit about the many kind of benefits and the positive life changes that adding some of this green or nature time. And you talk about having like a green hour or a green half an hour into your day, and what that can bring, especially perhaps for women in midlife.
Yeah, I think women in midlife, often we're very busy caring for others. So often have children or have parents who are getting older, and also juggling work. There's so much that's going on for women, and we can often put our needs right down the bottom,
Mm,
and find ourselves not feeling great. I like to think of nature, trying to think of how you get your green hour, just like you want to try and get, say, 8 hours sleep, eat 5 serves of veggies, 3 pieces of fruit, those kind of parameters, because I think sometimes people like to have something that they can kind of aim for. But it doesn't have to be 1 hour all in one go. We know with time spent in nature, there's no minimum it's all good for us, and the more nature, the better. So if you can go bushwalking or camping in nature for 3 weeks, that is going to be better than sitting in your courtyard, obviously, for 15 minutes. But anything that you can get is kind of good. So if you sort of start thinking about a green hour, you can kind of think, well, maybe I could spend 15 minutes. I think about sometimes bookending the day with nature, because there's always
mm,
like a sunrise and a sunset. Or maybe, first thing in the morning, just going to take my coffee outside and just sit for 15 minutes. And it can feel like, it sounds like not long, but actually it's a long time for a lot of people to spend 15 minutes. So sometimes just putting the phone on silent and setting the timer on the phone for 15 minutes. So you're not going to spend too long. It's only 15 minutes. And I'm just going to go outside and I'm just going to sit there and have my coffee, or just if you've got something beautiful to look at in the garden, I'm just going to spend 15 minutes outside, or I'm going to look at the clouds for 15 minutes, or just something out in nature. Or if you're working in an office, can you go outside at lunchtime? Is there a park? Is there some sort of green space you can go and sit in? And then could you maybe go once a week for an hour or 2 hours? So just try and get yourself a bit more time. I write in my book about, there's a chapter on using time in nature to help with stress. When my mother died, and quite suddenly, and it was a huge time of upheaval for me. And so I kind of brought all this that I knew about nature and meditation, or mindfully being in nature, and I just would schedule it. So every Friday morning I had a 2-hour block that was kind of sacred, and I would spend that 2 hours in nature. And I got a book of all the green spaces in Melbourne, and I would go somewhere different each week. And my phone would be off for that 2 hours. And it would just be like a meandering walk, not a power walk or anything like that. And I would just sit somewhere for a little while and just pay attention. It's sort of like a mindful exercise. So just noticing the sounds around you, and all the different colours that you can see and the shape, and having that sense of childlike kind of curiosity and playfulness can be really good for our brain to kind of engage. So doing things like, lying on the grass, looking up into a canopy, or rolling over onto your tummy and looking deep into the grass, or putting your cheek up against a tree or hugging a tree. All those sorts of things, which can look a little bit quirky, wacky, but actually it's just a really nice way to really kind of consciously be in that natural space.
Mm,
So they're kind of things that I would talk about. And if I have a patient who I'm thinking might benefit from a nature prescription, say they're having trouble sleeping or they're struggling with anxiety or depression, I talk to them first about the benefits. So, yeah, we know that obviously when you're outside in nature, you're more physically active. You get healthy levels of sunlight exposure, so it's good for your vitamin D. Your blood pressure levels drop, your heart rate slows, stress hormone cortisol in the body drops, our feelings of anxiety lower, our mood lifts, and when we go back inside, we can concentrate and focus better.
mm.
I'm sure there's more, but
It's a
and
lot. It's
there's a
good.
lot, right? There's a lot. If it was a drug, you're never going to be onto it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I sort of explain that to people, and then I say, well, look, what would be possible for you?
Mm,
How much time do you think you have, and where would be good for you to go? So some people are just busy, and 15 minutes once a day is where we start. So that might be, well, 15 minutes at lunchtime. I'm going to go outside and actually just not look at my phone for lunchtime, but put the timer on for 15 minutes or 30 minutes and just pay attention to everything that's around me. So that might be the nature prescription for that particular person. So I would discuss it with them. Together we come up with a bit of a plan of what it might look like, and then I would issue them with the nature prescription, and then I would set a reminder. So we would discuss it next time, in a fortnight or something like that, and see how they've gone. And for some people, they just love it, because a lot of people say, I do a lot of mindfulness meditation, and for some people they find that really hard. They can't
mm,
sit, because when you sit and you notice your mind, of course, you notice how crazy it is, right? There's
mm.
all these thoughts, it's going off everywhere. You can't kind of even focus on your breathing for more than like 2 breaths. It's off somewhere else. And so, or you get agitated, that feeling in your body. Whereas if you are instead doing a nature prescription, then it's about looking outside yourself. So you're looking out at nature. So even going for a walk around the neighborhood, but really literally stopping and smelling the roses, touching things, looking at the birds, all that kind of stuff. So just kind of really slowing it down a bit. So yeah, you
Mm.
can't go for a power walk with your earbuds in listening to a podcast. That doesn't kind of count. I mean, you could get some physical benefits from the exercise, and you're getting fresh air, but you're not going to be getting the psychological benefits of
Mm.
of that sort of sense of slowing down and the relaxation of the mind.
I think birds have been my gateway into nature. Like I love them so much, and I'm very fortunate to live in quite a sort of leafy suburb in Newcastle, and I can walk around the block literally 50 minutes, as you say. Every morning I get up, I go for a walk, get a coffee, but I don't listen to a podcast because I'm very like I feel like this has been this has been good for me. And the birds, I love seeing. If I see a bird, then it's a good day. Little rosella in a tree is just a treat. And that's been a midlife discovery. But yeah, I think it's been just a general gateway into enjoying being in nature without I used to always listen to music or podcasts, and I still do that, as much, occasionally, but I do like my quiet morning walks in nature. Very, very good for me.
What would you say to someone like me, I guess? I struggle with being mindful, and I make no secret of that with my medical team. My psychologist doesn't even bother saying mindfulness to me because she knows I'm going to roll my eyes and tell her I'm not going to do it, and she hasn't given up on me, obviously. I've been a patient for a long time, but we don't talk about mindfulness in that sense. And, she'll say to me, just go for a walk. Don't count the steps. Don't, it's not about counting how many steps I do on the walk. It's that I went for the walk, is what she cares about. I'm sure you pick and choose your patients as to, that some are going to be more receptive to a nature prescription, and probably the ones like me who are a bit more less receptive to it probably need it more than the ones who are
Mm.
open to it because they're possibly already doing aspects of it in their life anyway. So, yeah, like if someone's listening and they're like, "Oh my god, she wants me to go and walk in nature." No, it's not happening. How could they, I guess, overcome that fear or burden or feel like it's overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't like, so say you came and saw me and I thought you had pneumonia. I'm not going to give you a nature prescription, right? Sensible about it. And but I don't make up in my mind that someone like you is not going to be interested, because my experience has been that I offer it to everyone because I can't predict anymore. Because
Yeah.
there are some people who go, "Oh my god, that sounds amazing. I would love to do that," you know. So I would recommend it. I would suggest it to everyone, and of course, not everyone is interested or receptive. So, and I don't want to. I never want to sort of force things on people. So I sort of have more of a discussion around it. And I guess an entry point could be something like, yeah, taking your breakfast outside or something.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you kind of
Mm.
like, and I think that can be kind of a nice way with kids too. You know, when kids come home after school and they're starving, where you could just take their afternoon tea kind of snack outside, or you could on the way home from school have a picnic in the park or something. So, and same with the people in relationships. You know, often when we're early in our relationships, we do lots of things in nature, like we might go for a walk along the beach, or we might have a picnic outside. Like we do those kinds of things in our romantic relationships early on, but we kind of they drop off, you know. So
Mm.
sometimes doing those kinds of things can be a good way in. So just trying to think a little bit differently about it. And I guess with the mindfulness, I think it is difficult to learn mindfulness from like an app. I think it's probably almost impossible. I myself did an 8-week course with a teacher and others doing it. And that was great because you had that sense of community and
Mm.
you're all doing it together. And so you all notice, oh yeah, I find that really hard too. You know, I notice that too. And then you think, oh God, other people think, other people think like I
Yeah.
think. I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. So just because you found it hard, that when you've tried it doesn't mean you're never going to be able to do it. It's like one of my mindfulness teachers talks about her niece who got a surfboard for Christmas, and she took it in the water and she came out after 15 minutes and said, well, that's it. I'm never doing that again. That's hopeless. The same idea, because you're trying to train your mind. It's like any skill, you have to kind of regularly practice it, and it's not always going to be fun. It's
Yeah.
actually, you know, so, but we know that mindfulness is also really therapeutic and really helpful for us. But yeah, not for everyone. So certainly I wouldn't say you have to abandon that, but you might find that you could bring that mindful approach into nature, say, or into something else that you love, like, I don't know, even just having a shower, but actually being in the shower
Yep.
rather than being in the shower, ticking through your to-do list. You barely even notice that you're in the shower, kind of just thinking, oh, I'm going to really enjoy the shower.
Yep.
Like
Mm.
miracle, right? We turn on the tap and there's hot water. I mean, many people around the world, they don't have hot water. So just kind of the thing I used to struggle with, I used to walk around the house brushing my teeth in the morning. I just was always doing too many things at once. So that became my thing. When I brush my teeth, I'm just brushing my teeth, and I would put my hand on the bathroom sort of bench so I couldn't move, and I would just stand there and brush my teeth. Like that was my thing, was just to try and stand still for that one thing. So it's a real journey, I guess, and it you have to start where you are and then
Yeah.
just build from that.
Absolutely. I know Tracy, she has certainly started to trick me, if you like. It's and she's not tricking me. I'm very aware, acutely aware that she's getting me to do little mindful things, but
Mhm.
she's just not calling them mindful because
That's
she
right.
knows that for me, the roadblock is actually the word
The
rather
word,
than
yeah,
actually the task. So yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So you could just think about being. I'm gonna go outside and just
mm,
I'm gonna be a human being, not a human doing, you know? I'm
Oh,
gonna go
yeah, I love
outside just
that.
to be, you know,
yeah.
for 15 minutes. I'm just gonna be out there.
And I think we've
Mm.
forgotten how to do that. Like just
Mm.
as a generation, I'm probably a similar age to you, and we had, nature at there was a bush at the end of our street, and we just used to run around. And it's funny how, you were talking at the beginning how life was so much easier, to get
Oh,
out
yeah.
and do
Mm,
those things, and freer when
mm.
we were younger. And yet statistics would show that it is actually safer for children to be able to walk, and we know that the crime statistics would actually show that it is safer for children today than it was when we were growing up in the 70s, yet parents today are far more fearful of allowing their children to do those things. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yes, very much so, and I think there's a the parenting aspect to it is very interesting and something that we definitely struggle with overscheduling. We've got 2 boys and, yeah, trying to pare that back a little bit to try and grasp some sort of more free time. I think it's something for our, generation to think about, and perhaps the next generation will get it. They'll start reverting back a bit to a more 70s childhood vibes. Let's hope so. Dimity, I wanted to ask sort of about just general, as you are a GP, and we have you, and it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you. And our podcast is called The Change, and obviously we talk, Cathy and I, a lot about the perimenopause and going through that. And I wondered if you, as a GP, had seen a lot of changes in this area and how women going through peri or who have gone through menopause are treated medically. What kind of changes you've seen?
Well, huge changes, of
Mm,
course, in 30 years. So when I first started, everyone got put on hormone
mhm,
replacement therapy, just everyone. And then, there was a large
mm,
study that had some problems. So then everyone went off it. And there's still the fear based on that study, which was subsequently found to be really flawed.
mm,
And so there's this whole cohort now of women who are frightened of going on hormone therapy,
mm,
and yet it's so beneficial for so many women. So that has definitely been something that I've seen, and that's what happens in medicine. Things go up and down. So that's why I guess it's good being around for a long time, because you can kind of see
yeah, see
when
it. Mm,
when new fads kind of come in and then they go. And I guess because our health system, I think you alluded to it earlier, rewards rapid fire medicine, and what
mm,
women in midlife need, well, I think what everyone needs, but what women, particularly in midlife, need is they need someone who'll spend some time, because we want to talk about everything that's going
mm,
on. And we want to think about all the different possible solutions and have time to talk about what the perimenopause or what menopause is, what's happening in the body. And, because I think once you can understand what's happening with your body, you kind of feel more empowered to make decisions about what you want to do. So I think, unfortunately, the way general practice has gone is that it's got even more quick, I think.
mm,
So yeah, it's much quicker to rip off a script for an antidepressant than it is to spend some time with someone. And I think we've also become obsessed with youth and appearance. Like,
Mm.
that's been a big change. And I think that can be problematic, because women then they sort of fear menopause, or they fear getting older and
mm,
changes in their bodies. And yeah, and they sort of start, I guess, getting obsessed with how they think they're meant to look as they get older. And I don't think that's helpful.
mm.
Mm.
There's such a stigma attached to even the word menopause is like, oh, I don't
Mm,
know. It is changing. I think there's a lot of conversations like this that are happening that's helpful in that sense. But yeah, for so long, it's just been a kind of dirty word like, oh, you don't want to be old and menopausal and dry and all those awful words that you think about
yeah.
with menopause. You're like, oh, God.
It's interesting though, because it's only really in recent years. Like
Mm,
I, for many reasons, had a radical hysterectomy in 2017, I want to say, was it thereabouts. And before I had the surgery, I didn't consider what life was gonna be like for me after the surgery. Like it just, all I could think about was, "I need this done for all of these reasons." In fact, I'd probably only ever considered that in my life I would need a hysterectomy because my mum had one at 24. So,
Mm,
I was surprised to get to sort of 46, 47, whatever it was, to have not had it, sort of thing. But it never occurred to me that I would go into menopause straight afterwards, because they took my ovaries at the time. So that never occurred to me. I've got to say, my obstetrician, he delivered my twins. He did the surgery at the end as well. He was fabulous. And whenever I asked the questions, he gave me all the information, and he certainly spoke about studies and all of the, pros and cons and all of those sorts of things. Gave me the information when I asked for it. But if I didn't ask, he certainly didn't sort of go, "Are you aware this is gonna happen? You're gonna feel like these are the changes you can expect to sort of see or feel or have." I just thought, "Oh, it's a surgical option, bang, I'm gonna go to hospital, have that done, and I'll leave." And I woke up and I heard a crying baby, and it was in that moment, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna have a baby." It's like, "You're 46, woman. You were not having another baby anyway.
Mm.
Why?" Like, what was it? And I still reflect on that and just think, "Oh, it's so funny we don't talk about it." Well, we certainly didn't. I think there's been a real shift since sort of just in the last 5 to 6 years around talking about menopause and perimenopause, and that symptoms can last for a long time. Some people breeze through it, some no problems at all, and then others, it can be quite a challenging time. So I don't know. I think maybe it's Gen Xers who have been the quiet generation, have all gotten hot and a bit loud and annoying at the same time, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of that generation have missed out on a lot of that information around hormone therapy and choices and that kind of thing. And I think the other thing that's happened over my time when I was a medical student, the clitoris was not even in the anatomy textbook because it hadn't been discovered, right? And it wasn't until a Melbourne-based urologist, Helen O'Connell, went back and thought, this doesn't make sense. There's no way the clitoris is this small. And she went and redissected cadavers and so forth and discovered the true anatomy of the clitoris. So there's this whole generation of doctors who won't know that. So I think the gaps in knowledge about women's bodies within the health profession as well as within women amongst women themselves, because women are going and having labioplasties, those sort of
Mm,
surgeries. Like,
mm,
why would you mess with this part of your body that is designed to give us such pleasure? And got such an incredible blood and nerve supply. Like, why is this happening? Like, it's got to be because people don't really understand about it. So I think,
Mm,
yeah, and that's what's great about things like this podcast and women writing and talking, and we're hearing much more about everything to do with women's
mm,
bodies and women's experience, aren't we? I think
mm,
it's a great thing and it's definitely needed, because I think, yeah, there'll be a lot of people who don't know a lot about their own bodies. And because, yeah, as you said, you had this radical hysterectomy, and I'm sure the discussion was, oh, you might as well just have your ovaries out. One day they could cause cancer, just take them out. But actually, estrogen's kind of good for our bones. It was going to be obviously a massive change in your whole body to suddenly not have any estrogen. Whereas, when you're going through it otherwise, I guess it's up and down. It's a time of chaos. Hormones are going all over the place. So I guess there are other difficulties with it for some women, but it was a big thing that you went through. And I'm sure you thought about it a lot, but as you said, there are probably some parts of it that maybe weren't discussed as much as they could have been.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that would be just generally across the board, for a lot of women who are sort of around that 40 to 50 age range where they're coming into perimenopause, or, and not really sort of thinking, "Oh, what is this? What is happening to me?" And so many of my friends who are, late 40s, who were saying, and I'm saying to them, that's awfully like a perimenopausal symptom." And they're like, "Oh, but I still get a period." And it's like, you can still be having periods and dealing with symptoms, like, and they're like, "Oh, but, my doctor said my hormones are fine." And it's like, again, symptoms versus hormone levels change on a daily basis. And yeah, I mean, I've educated myself a lot more than what I understood before. So I'm, ramming it down all my friends' throats. I'm sure they're very sick of me saying, "Just go to the doctor and talk to them."
mm.
So,
But
Yeah,
that's a
you
good
really want to see a doctor
start.
who's going to have an interest in menopause, probably,
mm,
or
Mm,
someone who sees that group of patients, because there will be some doctors who aren't familiar. Like, we all get used to it, seeing certain groups of people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that sort of brings us to our last question as we're focusing on, we always ask guests about peri and menopause. As you know, as I've already said, this is the change, and we it's a big focus for Cathy and I. But I suppose in your case as a GP, what are some steps that women can take to care for themselves if they might be going through these very first early stages of peri? You're a big proponent of going out in nature. There are other options like HRT. Where do we need to start? What's the sort of first steps if we're starting to feel like, I think my hormones are fluctuating? What do we do? Do we come and see a GP? What's the first steps?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think that there are changes happening for you that could be related to you, whether you're getting periods or not, if you kind of,
Mm,
because you can also go through menopause earlier too. And we know that there's that perimenopausal time, which is sort of 5 or 6 years before that last period. So it could
mm,
be quite a long duration of time. So yeah, if you're experiencing sort of big fluctuations in your mood or your feelings of irritability, that kind of thing, or hot flushes or night sweats, those sorts of changes, irregular periods, those kinds of things happening, then it is good to go and have a conversation, or to sort of do a bit of research yourself. There are some
mm,
great sites you can check out, like the Australian Menopause Society or the Jean Hales have got a great website. And there are some, I think Kaz Cook's just written a
mm,
book,
Mm.
sure would be great too. So yeah, do a bit of reading, and then go and talk to a doctor about it. And I think if you're not sure that your doctor's perhaps familiar, or what they're saying is not really lining up with the things that you're reading, you might want to see a different one or something like that, just to make sure you're getting some good information about it all. Because I
mm,
think it's a time that you can kind of reassess your well-being, and try and think, well, how do I want to be going forward? What things can I change, and how can I look after myself? Because it's sort of about assessing, do a whole overview of your health, I guess, and how it's sort of how you're going physically and emotionally, and with the day-to-day challenges that you've got going on.
mm. It's like taking your car in for a bit of a checkup and just having that, yes, full holistic view of, yeah, how I'm going. And yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a good idea to do
Mm,
that,
mm,
once a year or something, I think, anyway. But it can be, like around, in your 40s,
mm,
be a good time to think about doing that.
And as you say, there's a lot of other benefits from that we get from estrogen, being the main one that we lose through peri and menopause. There's a lot of other benefits that we get from that that I'd certainly never heard of. I didn't realize how much of a role estrogen plays in, bone health, heart health. My psychiatrist calls it my, well, he calls it my bullshit hormone, and he said it helps me deal with
Is it
everybody
male? A
else's.
male psychiatrist?
Yeah, male psychiatrist, and he says that, it helps having more estrogen helps me deal with everybody else's,
Oh, I see. Mhm.
and so, the less estrogen I have, the less I have an ability to cope with everybody else's crap. There's a whole lot of benefits that I certainly didn't realize that come just from one little hormone, but it's actually a huge part of our bodies and how we are, which is important. And as you say, having a good supportive GP is really important in that process as well.
Yeah, and I think with hormones, they act through our whole body. Estrogen acts on our brain and our
Mm.
skin and our whole system. So the symptoms that we get as we go through perimenopause, which is really a time of kind of hormonal chaos. Sometimes we can ovulate twice in a cycle. It can be just like all over, literally all over the shop. And then you go through menopause, and then you have this drop in your estrogen. And so that can affect your whole body. And
Mm.
women can often be very black and white, like I'm either on hormone therapy or I'm not on it. And so I'll often have a chat about, well, why don't we could just try it.
mhm,
You're in control of it yourself. You could just try it for 6 weeks and see if it makes a difference or not.
mm,
And keep a little diary, like what your mood is, what your sleep's like, what your energy level's like, what your thinking's like, all those kind of things. And then, check in with yourself once a week and do that for like a 6-week period. And often what happens, of course, is they just feel absolutely fantastic because they can sleep, they can think, they feel more regulated in their
Mm,
mood. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not for everyone, but
mm,
Mm.
a lot of women find it really beneficial. So I think it's good to kind of have these conversations so
mm.
women are aware of the options that they've got.
Absolutely. Well, Dimity, thank you so much. I think that was a really, yeah, really interesting chat, and it's just affirmed my love for being out with the birds in nature as a number one. So I think I'm going to keep on walking without my headphones in.
Yeah.
And you've inspired me to maybe sit outside and drink my morning cup of tea
Yeah,
rather.
yeah. While it's still warm enough to do so, and then even when it's not, just put a coat on. Mm,
You can always go outside. There's always something, and actually it can be good when you're going through a hard time too. It kind of puts
mm.
things in perspective, I think, too, when you can see other creatures. It's not
Yeah,
just about you, there's other
Yeah,
people
that's
and
right.
other creatures around.
yeah.
Yeah.
Loved chatting to Dr. Williams, Dimity, as she was happy to be called. And I think she just had a lot of good, sensible advice, really, wasn't it? Very sensible, getting out in nature. And I have to say, and I've said this before on this podcast, I'm sure, that I think I attribute my slightly better mental health to in the last 12 months. So just getting out every morning for a 15-minute, 20-minute walk around the suburbs, no podcast allowed, no music allowed, and just looking at birds and trees and then getting a coffee and starting my day in that kind of quiet space. And I just think it's been so good for me. And I think all her knowledge and research essentially backs it up. And I feel justified in
Mhm.
taking that time for myself. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting.
Yeah, very. And you will forever be known as Laura the Twitcher from now on.
Yes. Yes. Happy to be known as the Twitcher. I'm very much leaning
I
into
mean,
that.
that is a very English hobby, I feel.
Do you
But
think? I've met a lot of Australian Twitchers. There's a few of
oh,
you
well,
around.
my English cousin is a Twitcher,
Oh,
but
really?
it's a bit odd. You're not odd, like my cousin.
I am happy to be odd. Happy to be odd.
But Dimity certainly gave me a lot of food for thought
Mm,
because, yes, as I said at the beginning, I'm an outdoors person. I'm not an outdoorsy person.
mm,
And I think she really has challenged me to think that I don't actually have to go out and do a bushwalk. I don't have
mm,
to go and sit on a trail or, do a massive trail hike run thing that is not me.
mm,
Let's be honest, it's just not who I am. Outdoors can be just sitting outside and enjoying some sunshine for
mm,
15 minutes, having my morning cup of tea, putting my phone down, leaving it inside, and just being and
mm,
not really thinking. Or, the thoughts are going to come and go, but just let them
mm.
come and go and just be in nature.
Yeah, and just really enjoy that cup of tea on your deck or in your yard, and
Mm,
kind of do the human being, not human doing. I like that. That's a good
yeah,
little phrase I've heard around the traps recently, which I think is sensible again. It's just
yeah. And she
it's
had a lot of
simple.
really sensible advice for women in their midlife as well. That
Yeah,
it's not all doom and gloom, and but we can really just enjoy who we are and the stage of life that we're in. And if we can incorporate nature into that somehow, or being outside, there's a lot of proven benefits to that as well. So,
yeah, and stepping away from that kind of consumerist culture where we focus so much on what we look like and social media, and this it's just such a confusing time to be alive in many ways, isn't it? And we're also plugged into technology. It can be very hard to step away, and then yeah, we feel cover our stressful lives by overeating or over drinking, and it's such
or
a
shopping,
common, or
or
shopping online, exactly. Oh my goodness. And it is such a common human
mm,
condition, isn't it? We just consume to kind of, yeah, paper over the cracks of our lives. And I think that, like she said, just being outside looking at the little creatures. I do love a little creature, but yeah, it sort of helps you to look outside of yourself and your own your own neuroses. And yeah, just realize that nature is, and that's what I love about things like a big storm or a big,
Mm,
not obviously a scary weather event, but when things happen and you're in nature, even just walking in the rain, sometimes it can just really make you think, oh yeah, it's not, the world is vast, and there's just, I'm just a little tiny ant, really. So it
yeah.
does help to, nature can be very centering and give us some perspective, which I think, yeah, she sort of talked
And
about. Mm.
I think she mentioned that, we're all after the quick fix.
Mm.
Sometimes the quick fix isn't the fix that we need. Sometimes we do need a little bit of a longer fix, which
Mhm.
might be just 15 minutes in nature every day. But we need someone to give us the permission to do that. And
Yeah.
I love that she does that with not all of her patients, but
Mm.
some of her patients. And and actually, she was. We'll put the links in the show notes, but she said that she has on her website a script for nature, that you can download yourself, and you can give yourself a script to go out and be in nature. And I just love that, sometimes we just need that permission to do those things. We
Mm.
feel guilty taking the time,
Mm.
but we know we're better for taking the time.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And I think maybe for some people, it might be useful to take their nature prescription to their doctor and be like, look at this, because it's probably something that a lot of doctors aren't maybe thinking about or aware about. And it's a great idea for, for many reasons, starting to think about the health benefits of simple stuff. And like she said, it's free. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great inclusive thing we can all do. And yeah, no, that was really, really interesting. And a lot of obviously what she said about perimenopause, and I think it's always great to have an expert kind of, like you say, it's not all doom and gloom. There are absolutely things that women can do in this, period of life, in midlife, and that HRT is a great solution for some women, not for all. But it is the fact that we have this choice now, and
Mm.
as a generation, we're fighting for these. We fought for it. I think the millennials and the Gen Zs are going to have it easy when it comes to
Mhm.
perimenopause, because we've done all the hard work, and here we are. And I think but it's good. We're starting to understand more about it and how we need to advocate for ourselves. And like she said, if your GP isn't perhaps on the same page as you, find someone that is. And I think that's such an important message, coming especially from a GP.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at _change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on The Change.